I have an interesting thought, and it's curious that you started off with saying there's space for amateur choir and community performances and stuff like that. Because arguably, yes, calypso and soca and stuff, it went through its amateur phase into professional commercial phase, and that's like the biggest commercial thing locally, right? Jamaica's dancehall and reggae, that's what we have. But we, of course, now with more singers being educated, like they have it easier than you. You're here to teach them, but there was no Natalia Dopwell necessarily to teach you per se.
I had an excellent voice teacher. What I did not have was access to tertiary education locally.
Yes.
Because for vocalists at that point in time,
so now
back
we have
in the olden days,
a higher level of formal training, right? So there's a greater proclivity to push more for professionalism. But I do think that for certain things like musical theater and various contemporary singing and other art forms, not soca and chutney soca and calypso, right? The amateur community roots are so recent that perhaps maybe the maturity, as you pointed out, has not necessarily always caught up, and we can't just operate like how we used to then. And you've actually straddled, I would say you are in a healthy, because you're doing it responsibly. You're putting down your foundation. As you say, you're staying in your lane. You were part of the community amateur performance space. Now you're more in the professional and academic space, right? And you're doing it stably. You're not overreaching. And you kind of understand how to be, when I need to be professional and when I have room to still be informal. Because we ain't reached, multi-million-dollar deals yet, right? But like, I do wonder if to some extent, not everybody like fully understands that. Either they try to reach too far, or they try to stay too informal, and everything is a blind.
The culture has just not caught up.
It doesn't know where it's at. It doesn't know the lane.
Okay,
right.
it's kind of a limbo.
It makes the mistake both ways.
Kind of a limbo sort of thing.
I think it's a negotiation time, because there's I would say, there's a generation that was accustomed to doing things a certain way, and they have established their way of doing it for 40, 50, 60 years. And then you have a younger generation who are being taught in a college sort of setting, an academic setting, and they're leaving school with an expectation of a certain level of engagement.
That's very important, because I remember speaking to a friend, and we were sort of observing how the new graduates are sort of existing in the professional space. And I had to tell him, listen, you and I had community exposure before we went into university. Many of them did not. Many of them just went from school straight into university. And yes, so they have this expectation. So when they get out into the world, they're like, wait, this is not what I was,
there's also a return culture shock. A reverse culture shock for people like me who trained abroad and then returned and was like, what? No one wants to sit down and listen to an entire recital of classical music? What's this? What's this?
I mean, I would argue part of it is just to find the audience in a lot of niche markets in TNT. But part of it is the audience they're not accustomed to that.
The audience is not accustomed. And I have to say, over the decade plus that I've been back in the country, the audience has also grown in sophistication, and it's not necessarily the older audience members.
That is true. Yeah.
It is younger audience members, and when you go to see, for instance, the National Philharmonic, when you go to vocal recitals, when you go to chamber music recitals, you see a very wide spread of age, very diverse in terms of all ethnicities, all ages, all socioeconomic levels. Yes. Because there, especially in this era where music is more accessible, it's not, a lot of young people no longer listen to the radio. I don't think people understand that younger than a certain age, they are not used to advertisements anymore. Okay, so when they want to listen to music, they're on Spotify or they're on YouTube, and they are specifically looking for what they want to listen to. So, for instance, my kids, they enjoy smooth jazz. Okay, that's
at the age of
8 and 11.
Wow.
Okay, and if you look for it, it exists. So if they want to listen to a smooth jazz interpretation of Zelda music, it exists. If they want to listen to smooth jazz version of Mario Brothers music, it exists. Okay, so when you just to the older generation that literally is used to just turning on the radio and letting the radio decide what they listen to, has one kind of
because when you were growing up, it was what?
It was whatever was on the radio. And then you would
Sesame Street.
And you put the cassette in and you would record so that you could later on go back and listen to that thing that you recorded badly.
I was far too lazy to
I had
that.
cassettes upon cassettes of things that I recorded from the top 40 and but that was a different era. We just didn't have access to quite as much music. So even when I was learning arias in foreign languages, I'm always telling my students, listen, y'all just have to go on Google. And just find the lyrics and then translate the lyrics. It will take you 2 minutes. Whereas I would be handed a dictionary, an Italian-English dictionary. Go translate your aria. And I would find out what the aria sounds like when my teacher sung it for me.
In fact,
I didn't have YouTube to listen to 5 or 6 or 10 different versions
You're actually making it sound harder than it is, because you don't even actually have to translate it. There will be a translation.
Yes.
That's what you meant.
No, but I tell them not to do that. Because if you look for the translation, a lot of times it's a rhyming translation that you could potentially sing. So it doesn't line up properly.
Okay.
So you're not gonna, it's not actually, sometimes it's completely nonsensical.
It does take some work because it kind of
this is why I say media literacy is going to replace literacy as being the most important thing, because I'm sure you could find the proper translation that you're looking for if you know how to find it.
To know how to do it, because it can't just be one source.
There are specific sources that will give you a better word-for-word translation.
So it's almost like if as a nation, outside of our already established commercial enterprises, our arts and performing arts, particularly with music, it's almost like if now we have our education is getting jump-started, turbocharged, and the industry part of it is like fighting and struggling to catch up.
And some people, I think, also have a lot to lose with that shift towards professionalism in the industry, because I think a lot of amateur organizations rely heavily on adult amateurs. Which do exist.
Yes.
I have a lot of adult amateur students, and I know a lot of adult amateurs who very passionately, after their day job, will go out and spend a lot of time in their community, singing and performing and helping things get done. But that culture is one that I think they need to make sure that they are satisfying the needs of those individuals. As opposed to just assuming that this is the only outlet for those individuals.
Because the space used to just be those were the performances available, right? If you wanted certain styles of music for musical theater and stuff, right?
Whatever they give you, and also that they have this, their audience has one specific music that they expect to hear when they show up. So it's a certain programming.
One of the things that I think, coming back to that, you also mentioned, you had relationships with people. That's easy to manage when it's a one-on-one sort of thing. But when an organization sort of grows, those sort of informal sort of ways of dealing with things doesn't always work, because the thing is this big, and you can't just go off of the word of whoever is the director of the organization and things like that.
It's not just music. I have seen just about any informal, non-professional group for individual activity, whatever, after work stuff that I have been a part of, seen, heard of, whatever. Just the propensity of the social structure to not stand up because it reaches a certain point where it's just hard to manage.
Yes, exactly. And you also sometimes have friction between board members who are not active members, vocal members, but simply sit on a board to manage financial. But they then try to manage things like the repertoire and the leadership people, and and these kind of frictions are, again, a friction that's caused by now trying to regulate these groups more because they now have to maintain their charitable status or their national,
but not just that. I think there's something to be said where the older generations are accustomed to a certain way because that was all that was available to them at the time, right?
And there was no one trying to regulate it.
But the problem now is that the younger generation, and you might not be quite aware, like just how the new skill set has upended.
No, yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
Because when you and I think about the choirs that we were in, when I say the actual personal grouping, say in the early 2000s, and the skill level that's now available out there now, it is completely different. And it's no fault to people back then because everybody had to do the best they could, right?
I will say that something that I keep getting asked, always by older audience members, is, so where are you based?
Wow.
Oh, as in you need to be in an organization.
Which organization, which choir?
No, which country?
Oh.
There is an assumption that and this is again coming from the older generation, not the younger generation. The younger generation understand that you can choose to have a professional career in Trinidad.
Right.
But the older generation, there was nothing available for a professional to do. So Trinidad is the place that you retire to.
What did they think of people like Eddie
But Eddie has a doctorate in education, in mathematics or something like that. He has an
international competition winner, winning vocalist.
But he is not. But it's not his job.
Right. Okay.
It's not his job.
He's known for so like Wendell is in communications and so on and so on.
Yes. But you have a huge population of musical professionals who left Trinidad. And would come back, do a concert, and then leave again.
Yes, like Etienne Charles,
Oh, there's tons of them.
Although one of his contemporaries, Tony Paul, seemingly does a lot of work.
Because he has a teaching job at UTT.
Oh, right.
Okay, so we have to kind of be aware that past a certain age bracket, because there was no tertiary education available, and because once you take that little step to tertiary education abroad, you end up with reverse culture shock that is real when you come back to Trinidad. And you've lost some touch with your networks, and your networks are amateurs. So coming back is rough. Coming back is rough.
Because you would have fundraised to go abroad, right? They would have been very clear and limited in terms of time goals.
And you can always sell tickets to a fundraiser. It's much harder to sell tickets for a professional performance.
Right.
Right? So also our audience is accustomed to viewing amateur performances. And I will say, earlier this year, I gave a concert. The French embassy asked me to do a recital of all French songs. And the response was so confused. I'm serious. I got a lot of people coming like, how did you do that?
Really?
How did you?
I'm so confused.
How did you memorize all of those songs? How did you, because they're not used to it. No, they've never experienced it. How would you know?
Because the first half, we've had people singing in foreign languages locally, but it's an entire recital.
Right. It's an entire recital, and the first half I wasn't amplified. Okay.
Well, that and all they probably really.
So people are not used to these things.
And each song has a different personality, has a different character, has a different message. And what we did is we used projection to project the, sort of a compressed idea of what the poetry was about.
Image projector.
An image projection.
To give a visual cue.
So if you weren't French speaking, you still had you knew what was going on. And so they could engage with it. And it was just me and a pianist. There's no need for technicolor. There's no need for smoke machines and light effects and, dancers. And if you don't, if a singer is trained in how to command the interest of an audience and how to tell a story, which again, people are like, oh, you're so talented. No, I'm trained.
I love that. I've never heard a more positive self-deprecating statement in my life. No, it's not that I'm talented, I'm trained.
But come back to
You
the
know,
audience.
it's so simple, even a caveman can do it.
You know, we don't expect a footballer to kick small goal football and then get pulled up by you know, some recruiters and take. No, you know that at some point they have to go be trained, and even at that point, it's not. You know, it's not automatic that they're going to end up on a national team or you know, because these things are hard.